how your product could be your best marketing, an example of approaching acquisition from the bottom up, and the value of the emotional response created by your product. That and more on this episode of Advertising Influencers.
Advertising Influencers. Conversations with today's top-tier marketers from Silicon Valley and beyond. Powered by Instapage, the most powerful landing page solution.
Hello. My name is Ander, and on behalf of the entire team here at Instapage, welcome to Advertising Influencers. As the folks behind the most powerful landing page solution, my team and I are on a continual mission to lower the cost of customer acquisition, part of which is to bring you the stories of CMOs, VPs, and other marketing thought leaders from Silicon Valley and beyond about how they break through the noise and navigate crowded markets to build successful businesses. Last episode featured Olaf Mathe, the CEO of Mixmax, an awesome company that is changing the way we use email, myself included. Highly recommend checking out that episode after this one concludes because Olaf has some really fascinating insight into creating rich experiences within a product and using those experiences to generate natural product virality. This episode, the all-star lineup continues, this time with a mobile app, and the head of marketing at that mobile app, our guest, Nat Robinson, head of marketing at MileIQ, a company that has dramatically, to say the very least, simplified the process of tracking mileage when you drive for work. They were acquired by Microsoft in late 2015, and they are continuing to grow like crazy. But what's really cool is the emotional response that they get out of their users, and that is part of what we're going to discuss in this episode. Prior to MileIQ, Nat was the VP of marketing at VMware, and he worked with SlideRocket, a PowerPoint competitor. He started his marketing career at Oracle, where he spent 13 years more or less, and ultimately ended up working as a VP of corporate marketing. So needless to say, there is a lot to talk about. On that note, let's go over to the Microsoft office in San Francisco and go say hello to Nat. Thursday afternoon here, and I am in the quite beautiful Microsoft offices here in San Francisco, probably one of the many Microsoft offices here in San Francisco, I'm guessing. And I am here with the head of marketing and growth at MileIQ, a Microsoft company, Nat Robinson. Nat, how you doing?
Hey, Andrew, I'm doing well, thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. You've got a really nice space here, really like getting out of where I'm at to see all the other offices everyone has in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's a little nicer than our previous offices, our startup offices, so we're pretty happy to be here.
Yeah, and MileIQ somewhat recently acquired by Microsoft.
Yeah, about 18 months ago, we joined the Microsoft family of companies. We're still a subsidiary company of Microsoft, so we have some independence, but very, very happy to be part of the larger ecosystem that is Microsoft.
Awesome. So before we dive into all of these great things I talked about in the intro and that we've got on the agenda today, let's hear about MileIQ. I told our audience a little bit about it before we actually sat down for this conversation, but what is this product that you are working on, that you've been working on for a little over 3 years now?
Yeah, it's had a few different iterations, but at the core, it's a mobile app. It's a service that helps you log your miles, the miles that you drive for business. Whether you're a realtor driving from gig to gig or a side hustle person, maybe doing some gig economy driving, or you're employed and you're working as part of your business day. Really, anyone who drives for work can use MileIQ and use it to automate really time-consuming and laborious task, or previously laborious task, that quite frankly, a lot of people just didn't do before. Or maybe they did manually using a pen and paper logbook. That's the analog version of MileIQ. And, we've been around for about 3 years now, kind of leading this space in terms of an automated version of this service, something that you could call touchless, if you like, that you kind of install on your phone, runs very quietly in the background, doesn't require a lot of interaction from you, and just goes about its business, logging your business drives, actually logging all your drives, and then you can come in when it's convenient to you and say, oh, these drives for business and these drives for personal with a simple swipe, right for business, left for personal, and classify your drives that way. So all the work has been done for you. You just come in and classify, and then the benefit, obviously, is you either getting reimbursed or being able to deduct those business miles.
If I were using it when I was a consultant, certain parts of my life would have been much simpler.
Yeah, obviously we have great reviews in the App Store, and I think for a variety of reasons that we'll probably get into today, but predominantly is people who weren't doing this before now can have this task taken care of by MileIQ. They can go about their business day knowing that it's running in the background on their phone and taking care of business in terms of their mileage log.
Awesome. Well, you're working for a really cool company, really cool product right now, but you've also got a really cool history. You spent a lot of time at Oracle and in other executive positions as a marketer in the past. So maybe you can tell us just briefly how you ended up here, what you did before, and what brought you to MileIQ.
Sure. Well, I started kind of ironically now working for the tax department in New Zealand, where I'm from. That was my first job out of...
The tax department?
It's called the Inland Revenue Department.
Oh, okay.
In New Zealand, the equivalent of the IRS here. And that was a kind of a very traditional data processing, large mainframe kind of environment. And it was a good first job after getting my IT degree. But I knew that I didn't want to stay there that long. And fortunately, the lady who sat next to me was the wife of the chief marketing officer at Oracle in New Zealand, which led to me becoming a sales consultant in New Zealand, doing database and tools and kind of 4GL stuff at the time. And then, one thing led to another, and I found myself here in Redwood Shores at headquarters for Oracle, and had kind of a whole career at Oracle, about 13 years, climbing the ladder, if you like,
Sure.
in a large corporate environment. And having some success, but then after a while realizing, hey, look, I'm here in Silicon Valley. There's so much innovation, so many entrepreneurial things happening. I'd be crazy not to jump in and try something like that. So after that period at Oracle, went to a very early startup called SlideRocket, which I was the first hire after the founders, and they were taking on PowerPoint essentially with a cloud-based version of competitor, if you like, to really change up what a presentation meant. And so in many respects, we were competing with Microsoft PowerPoint.
Which is that's a tricky thing to compete
Taking
against.
on a gorilla, yeah. And it was great from a PR point of view because, we could say, are you bored with PowerPoint? And everyone would universally say yes and respond to that. And so I think we had a great run at SlideRocket. I think it's another space that we sort of, an online presentation, what does that mean? We helped define what that meant during the time. The company was acquired by VMware. I didn't want to stay forever at another large enterprise company like VMware, so I quickly moved on to some other things. And really, SlideRocket was the beginning of my startup career, if you like, if you compare that to an enterprise software marketing career at Oracle. So I've been doing startups ever since. I met Chuck Dietrich at SlideRocket. We hired him as the CEO during one of the rounds of funding there, and went off and did a few other things after SlideRocket, but then reconnected with him and Dan Bomsey as MileIQ was getting started. I think one of the biggest things that drew me to MileIQ was the utilitarian nature of it, that it was a very simple app and concept, but it had a very broad appeal. And even then, at the very first version, users were responding so well to it. You can go back and look at the reviews back then, and that was one of the things that drew me to the app and every day helps me come to work, is the user reviews are just phenomenal in terms of not just the utility that they get out of it, but the benefit that they get, and quite a wide variety of benefits.
Sure. And so throughout this whole time, from when you started at Oracle, when you got into marketing, how would you describe your marketing philosophy, if you have one? What's something that you think is important when you're just considering marketing as a whole?
Yeah, I think one tenet that I always stick to is, your product is your best marketing. Whether that means whether you're a customer or product-led company, or whether that means you're actually using the product to do marketing for you, maybe like through a referral program, or just that the product is so amazing that people are evangelizing it by themselves. If you can create that kind of reaction, not necessarily to your brand, but to your product, then that is a solid underpinning for growth.
And I would completely agree. And it sounds like that, especially based upon what you said right before I asked you that question about the kinds of reviews that you were getting in the App Store and elsewhere for how relevant and awesome the product was. And one of the things I think that's interesting is when you have a product like MileIQ or something else that has these very real world applications, it's a very different quality than marketing SaaS or selling enterprise hardware or an analytics tool, in that it is really affecting something that's already happening in the day-to-day lives of so many businesses and so many consumers, which I think is something that is fascinating, quite frankly. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what it's like bringing this digital world into the analog world and solving that problem for that group of people.
Sure. Yeah, it's a big underpinning of Mobile Data Labs, which is the company that created MileIQ. We set out with mileage to take a problem that people were experiencing in a variety of ways and automate that, and create a digital version, if you like. And that problem, as we've come to understand it, is multifaceted in terms of a very simple problem, which is mileage logging. So the requirement is that you need to keep a consistent log, an up-to-date all year long log of your business drives to enable you to itemize that as a deduction. That's an onerous task if you think about it. And I think you've experienced this firsthand.
Sure, yeah.
Like, oh, wow, if I had to do that for every drive, and not just my business drives, I have to log all my drives and then say which ones were business. There's very few people who can actually do that accurately. Like we're human, we're fallible, we forget things, we get sidetracked. There's a lot of demands on our time. We do hear from customers who are like, I do this and I do it well and I don't need an automated solution or a mobile solution. And that's amazing. We salute those folks.
Sure.
But for most of us who can't do that, then it's nice to have a backup in the form of a service like MileIQ. But the other part of the problem is, even if you're aware that there's a mileage deduction, and some people just aren't, so there's an education component here. But even if you are aware, people tend just not to do it. It's this huge time-consuming task, and they get to their accountant or they get to the end of the year to file their taxes, and what happens is they end up guesstimating a number. That's problematic from a couple of different points of view. One is they tend to underestimate, because they didn't realize how much they actually drive for work. And this is one of the comments actually we see from people who use the app is, wow, I didn't realize that I actually drove so much for work now that I see every drive popping up. So that's between 20 and 40% of the drives that they were missing out on because they just underestimated.
Wow.
The other problem is that if you don't have the log and you get audited, that creates some real world problems for you with the IRS.
Yeah, a different category of problems.
Multifaceted. You could lose your entire deduction. You could have to pay a fine. It goes on and on. So that's not a great scenario to have. So another thing is that we have users who are kind of using MileIQ as an insurance policy. Like, it's $60 a year or $59 a year. If I drive a lot, that's not a lot to pay just to have a log of all my drives. Even if I didn't classify any of the drives, that's just a backup. I know that I have it logged, so that if I ever get in that situation of being audited, that I have it. I'm good. So those are some of the problems or the different kind of ways that people are using MileIQ. Not the normal way necessarily, but maybe more just the variety of ways that we learn that people are using the app.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're talking quite a bit about some of the self-employed folks out there, some of the consultants, et cetera. But you also have a product for teams and possibly for enterprise in some cases. So what do you see are some of the unique challenges with marketing this product into that space and fostering that adoption?
Yeah, there's a slightly different value proposition for companies. We've purposely taken a bottom-up approach. So let's go to consumers, or in this case, self-employed folks first, or really end users first, because we felt like that would bubble up into the enterprise, and that's kind of what's happened. People started using it for themselves. Maybe I'm a salesperson, I'm employed, and then they started reporting with that to their employers, and they could see that these are MileIQ reports, and it kind of caught on that way.
Was that bottom-up a strategy by design, or did it just kind of end up that way?
It was by design, largely because a number of us in the company had worked selling to enterprise before. We knew the different set of requirements.
Sure.
Plus, we were sort of banking on this notion of bring your own apps, which is becoming more and more frequent these days, just because I think partly because the apps that were designed for consumers were designed a little better and a little more enjoyable to use. So that's another facet to MileIQ, is that we purposefully spend a lot of time on design and making it easy to use and hopefully delightful, delightful interactions. So what happened was that bubbled up into the enterprise, and we started getting calls from small and large companies and said, hey, we better start to think about how to provide for these users. As I said, the value proposition's a little different. We get calls from procurement folks who's has a budget of $20 million for mileage reimbursement, and they want to make sure that that's being reported accurately. And generally they feel like it's not, that their employees are padding it somehow, or just that the employees don't have a really accurate way to report on their mileage. And of course, from the employee's point of view, they have to spend quite a lot of time creating the mileage logs to then get their expense reimbursement. So there's slightly different benefits for a company user, for a Teams user, who are looking to save money rather than necessarily be reimbursed. But it generally works out on both sides of the equation, where we can say, yeah, you're going to get more accurate reports and you're going to save your employees time in reporting.
And one of the things that is unique about your product is the amount of data that it is going to generate. Obviously there's so much data every single place that we look for, every single tool that we're using, but you're taking data that's occurring in the real world, meaning the miles that you're being put on your car, and then that is actually being translated digitally into the app and then goes up to the cloud and wherever else it goes. And we're going to talk about the other components of the marketing outside of the data momentarily, but what have you found has been unique and interesting and cool about having all of this data of how people are using their drives, how people are using the mileage on their car? How has that contributed to how you market the product?
Yeah, so we've logged over 20 billion miles since we started, and we've learned a lot about driving habits of folks, and both business and personal drives, and what kind of cars are most popular in North America. And, whatever else users have shared with us. I think, one of the nice things about MileIQ is that it's using data that's already on your phone. Those signals that are coming in and going out. You wouldn't really ask you to enter a lot of data about your drives. It's all sort of happening automatically. Again, it sort of comes back to me for like the interesting different ways that people are using their app. We have a nurse practitioner who uses the app to prove that she went to a location so that she could get paid. We have a lawyer who was logging the time that he was driving for so he could get paid for driving to the client. So those are different ways in the ways that users are using the data or the information that we're giving back to them. But I think generally this is sort of the value outside that we talk about for users is, how are they reporting that? How does that become more seamless for them to get the value out of their drives? So we've done integrations with Concur and FreshBooks, and we really try to streamline getting the value out for users. In a big data sense, obviously we're extremely careful about what we do with users' data. We often ask, would you like to sell this data?
I'm sure people have asked you that before.
I mean, it's a really simple answer for us. No, we're not interested in monetizing this at all. We take our users' privacy very seriously. Even before we joined Microsoft, that was a big deal for us. And being very careful about how we treat that data. So, I think we've also been very careful. We've talked about wouldn't it be interesting to anonymously surface some of this data for research purposes, for cities, perhaps, to better understand user driving patterns, but we've even resisted doing things like that.
Understandably. Yeah, I totally understand that. So with all this conversation about data, and obviously data is very, very important to the decisions that we make as marketers, I found that in some cases, the emotional or qualitative components of marketing have been forgotten about in some cases, and obviously not just totally cast aside or anything like that, but it sounds like, especially with some of the stories that you have spoken about, especially, the nurse practitioner, the lawyer, the person using MileIQ as an insurance policy in case they get audited, there's some real emotional and qualitative value here, even for a product in a B2B space. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we often push the benefits of MileIQ as being obviously, money back in your pocket or found money, time saved, and then peace of mind. And I think that really speaks to some of the emotions that we see being reflected back at us. It's reflected in our NPS scores. I think it's reflected in our reviews, and just talking to customers is a very emotional response to kind of solving this problem of mileage logging that they obviously have some angst about, or almost guilt in some ways that I know I should have been doing this, but I haven't been doing it because it's such an arduous task. And when they discover MileIQ, there's this amazing sense of relief. Like, I don't have to think about this, but I can still get the benefits of my mileage deduction or my mileage reimbursement. Varying from I love MileIQ to I don't know how I worked before MileIQ. I wish I'd had this 18 years ago when I was a salesperson in that career. A really wide variety. It's kind of been surprising that that for a tax-related app, a finance-related app, that people would have these kind of emotional responses to solving this problem. When you read the reviews, it's almost visceral. It seems so tangible that people are having this strong emotional response to whether it's the finance component, the time component, or this, I just don't have to think about this anymore, relief.
Yeah, I see a lot of marketing that is save X amount of dollars per year with this solution, with this tool. And every time I see that, I find myself thinking, okay, that's great, but what does that actually mean? And depending on what that money is being saved for or saved on or whatever, I mean, that could be financial security in a consumer product. That could be a vacation for a family if it's a B2C product, or something like that. There are so many different ways that you can look at it. And it's tricky to do in B2B or in more business-focused type tools. Have you guys tested or seen what the difference is between using more quantitative value propositions versus these qualitative ones?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot around money found, time saved, these core benefits that we see. What we haven't really done, I think it's really hard to translate into something in an ad, like what is the emotional component of this app that you really can't get until you experience it for yourself, I think. It's hard to say. I mean, it's almost like, hey, you're going to be better looking and richer if you use this app. I mean, that sounds glib to say that, but in some ways that would probably work better. It's hard to say you're going to be 20% less stressed by using this app. And that may be absolutely true. It's just hard to quantify.
Do you think that there's a reason that other products that have these business applications are not doing this? Because I feel like there are so many that could be that aren't.
I think it's pretty standard to say, money found, money earned. I mean, Uber does this, like you're going to earn this much per month, right? I think that's tangible for a lot of people. Like, wow, $1,400 in my pocket, that's meaningful. That could be, better education. I think that's what you have to get to is what does it actually mean for that consumer? Right,
and I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to this. I'm kind of just exploring this idea a little bit, I guess you could say. But is it more powerful to be saying you have $1,400 extra in your month, or you have your mortgage for a month covered,
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
And I think it's tricky to know which might be more appropriate depending on the audience.
Yeah. I mean, our number is $6,900. The average user's clocking or logging $6,900 in deductions or reimbursements. And that's the average user. Like we have users who are logging north of $20,000, $30,000. They really drive that much.
$20,000, $30,000 in deductions?
In deductions, yeah. I mean, these are people who are driving 6,000 miles or more a month. These are the guys who get a new car every year.
Yeah,
right? Because it's worn out by the end of the year. So there's a relatively small percentage, but there's a wide spread of people who are driving to get to that $6,900 number. I think a lot of people just don't believe that number because, again, they're not used to what they could actually be logging until they start using MileIQ.
Oh, that's interesting. So, I mean, that's almost like saying that deduction is so tremendous, it's almost unbelievable.
Right.
And so maybe you would even need something that's more digestible and concrete.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real number for us, so we use it. It's a claim that we use along with our other claims. And I think that's pretty standard. What we probably haven't done enough of is like trying to tap into the emotional reaction. I just don't think we found a neat way to do that yet.
I don't think many companies have, to be honest,
Yeah.
Is that something you think more companies might be looking for ways to do in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, I think maybe a standard way to do it is like, here's our customer view, but people sort of second guess that, like, is that really real? That could have been written by anyone. But I mean, like I said, it's the thing that keeps us coming to work every day. We're constantly floored by the kinds of reactions that people have to a simple service like MileIQ.
And I know a lot of your thinking around the marketing with MileIQ and the product in general. I know a lot of it has been consistent since before your acquisition 18 months ago. But given that you were acquired by such a significant company, Microsoft, on somewhat of a separate note, how is coming into a company underneath the umbrella of such a powerful behemoth of a company, how does that change how you think about your marketing?
Yeah, I think I know a big part of the reason we joined Microsoft is that our missions lined up pretty nicely. MileIQ and the apps that we're now building are all about automating parts of your life, automating productivity, helping you be more productive. And this new Microsoft that we've joined is all about helping every organization and every individual in the world to achieve more. So that seemed like a really nice way for us to scale up what we were doing and reach more people in the process. In terms of, so that really is about reach,
Sure.
And scale. And, being part of the Microsoft engine obviously has some benefits.
Of course.
Their businesses are just so large compared to even our great business for an app. We have really great business for an app, but when you compare it to some of the established businesses of Microsoft, it's small, obviously.
Sure.
So I think we're still navigating the best way to do that. Obviously, we're integrating our technology, our tech stack, but more importantly, figuring out the appropriate ways to get in front of Microsoft users and Microsoft customers. There's going to be some announcements coming up in the very near future, actually, that speaks to one of the things that we've been working on for a while.
Cool.
I can't talk about it just yet.
Of course.
But within a month, early June, you'll hear something about the kind of like the first step that we're making in that respect of more properly integrating with parts of Microsoft. Very,
very cool. Well, looking forward to seeing that announcement. Last question I have for you, as I know that we're running out of time. What is something that you think, in the context of some of the things we've talked about, what's something that you think marketers can be doing to make marketing better? The community of marketers better as a whole, whatever it might be.
One of the things that we do on a fairly regular basis that I have really come to like is just sitting down with other marketing teams. In this case, because we're more mobile focused, tends to be other mobile growth teams, and comparing notes. And I like that for a couple of reasons. One is you tend to learn things that you didn't know, or things that maybe you're doing that other people have taken a different spin on. So it's a great learning opportunity. The other one is it creates a sense of community around marketing. If you can do that on a fairly consistent basis, you get to cross-pollinate ideas with other teams, but you get to meet a lot of other people who are facing the same or similar problems to the ones that you're facing. So it's kind of nice to feel like, hey, we're not in this alone. Everyone else has very similar problems, and maybe they've solved some of them, and we can benefit from that. And maybe we can share some of the things that we've been doing that they can learn about. So I think I wouldn't call it networking per se, but I would call it like being generous.
Knowledge sharing.
Yeah, knowledge sharing and being generous, not holding back. Certainly we're not going to competitors, to full-on competitors and having those kinds of conversations. But we meet with companies in quite different industries who have the same growth problems or challenges that we have, and that's really interesting. So you get to learn about different industries, but in a sort of a common platform, I guess.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. And I completely agree with you. It's one of the reasons we do this podcast at Instapage is to encourage this knowledge sharing. There's so many great marketers out there with great ideas and great resources and different perspectives here in the Bay Area and beyond, of course, that something we encourage as well. So, Nat, this has been a pleasure. Great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to have me here in your office. Are we in the Twitter building?
We're in Market Square building.
Market Square building.
It's commonly called the Twitter building.
That's okay, but officially it's the Market Square building with that awesome grocery store.
We like
downstairs.
to think of it as the Microsoft building.
Of course. Yeah. What am I talking about? This is the Microsoft building. But once again, thank you so much for having me here. Really appreciate your insight, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Andrew, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Here are the takeaways from our conversation with Nat. As essential and powerful modern inbound and outbound marketing is today, and despite the rate at which it's growing, nothing compares to organic and honest enthusiasm and evangelism from your customers themselves. Referral programs and building in other incentives or forms of virality within the product can function as an excellent driver for growth. However, the story of a user's aha moment has tremendous potential for generating loyalty and evangelism. Consider the bottom-up approach to acquisition. Marketing is frequently more effectively targeted to the end user instead of the authority making the purchase decision, even though they still have to be convinced of the conversion as well. While there might be value propositions of your product for all business stakeholders, make sure you contextualize and personalize your marketing to cater to all of their different needs. Every product creates an emotional response. It's important to make it as easy as possible for your target users to understand the real unique value proposition of a product. Instead of offering the surface value proposition of saving money or saving time that you might encounter when you use a product, consider what that saved money or time literally translates into for your target users. Perhaps it's an extra hour with their family, or maybe it's more cash to invest in their business and hire a new employee. Great conversation with Nat, and I love what he had to say about the visceral reaction your product has the potential to create within your users. And as always, you can check out the transcript on the show notes page for this and every other episode at instapage.com/podcast. And if you have any thoughts or questions about anything Nat and I talked about that you'd like to share or discuss, please feel free to send me an email. It is Ander, A-N-D-E-R, @instapage.com. The rest of our team would also love to hear from you as well. So come say hello to us over on social media or on instapage.com, where we've also prepared a ton of resources on advertising personalization, lead generation, and modern marketing trends to help our goal of helping you lower the cost of customer acquisition. Next episode, we're speaking with Patrick Holmes, my friend and one of our very own influencers here at Instapage. And we're going to be talking about some of the really awesome things that we at Instapage are doing with our own product, using AdWords, Facebook, and other digital advertising platforms. And most importantly, we're going to take a deep dive into advertising personalization. All right, my fellow marketers, I am out for now. My name is Ander, and you are listening to Advertising Influencers. Cheers to your future success, and cheers to better marketing. I will talk to you soon.
Advertising Influencers. Conversations with today's top-tier marketers from Silicon Valley and beyond. Powered by Instapage, the most powerful landing page solution.